Dublin, Ohio. June 2026. The Memorial Tournament at Muirfield Village Golf Club is about to begin its 50th playing, and before a single ball is struck, the biggest story of the week has nothing to do with the leaderboard. It has to do with a press conference room, a microphone, and an 86-year-old man who built the golf course the players are standing on. Jack Nicklaus is not just another name at this tournament. He is the tournament. In 1976, he founded the Memorial, and he has hosted it every year since. He is also, by any measure, the most decorated golfer in history, with 18 major championships, a record no one has come close to touching. In 1968, Nicklaus was one of the players who helped break away from the PGA of America to form what became the modern PGA Tour, a structure built on player ownership and player control. That history matters, because it means Nicklaus is not an outside critic. He is one of the people who built the institution he is now criticizing. That founding moment in 1968 was itself a response to outside control. Before that year, tournament players had little say over how their own tour was run, and the break from the PGA of America was driven by golfers who wanted the business of professional golf managed by the people who played it, not by an outside governing body. Nicklaus was part of that generation, alongside Arnold Palmer, and the structure they built has shaped the sport for close to 6 decades. Understanding that history is what makes the current moment land the way it does, the person now pushing back against an outsider's plan for the tour is one of the very players who once pushed to take control of the tour away from outsiders in the first place. Sitting across the sport from him is Brian Rolapp, the PGA Tour's new chief executive officer. Rolapp joined the tour in late July 2025, arriving from the NFL, where he had spent years on the business side of the league, handling media rights and league strategy. He was hired specifically because he came from outside golf. When his appointment was announced, Rolapp made clear that he would not feel bound by the sport's traditions as he searched for what he believed was the best path forward for the business. Since taking over, he has repeated a specific phrase to describe his vision for the tour: scarcity, simplicity, and parity. That phrase is the key to understanding everything that followed. Rolapp's model treats professional golf the way the NFL treats its regular season: fewer marquee matchups, tighter competition, and a product built for television audiences and media rights deals rather than for the widest possible spread of tournaments and players. It is, in a literal sense, a business playbook imported from a different sport. Golf structure is not the NFL structure. Golf has no draft, no salary cap, no fixed opponent schedule. It has a tour calendar built up over decades, with tournaments that carry individual histories, individual sponsors, and individual host relationships, like the one Nicklaus has with the Memorial. Importing an NFL-style approach into that structure was always going to create friction somewhere. By June 2026, it created friction with Nicklaus. Ahead of the Memorial, Nicklaus spoke to the media at Muirfield Village and was asked directly what he thought about the product the PGA Tour was currently offering under Rolapp. His answer began with an attempt at restraint, then abandoned it within seconds. "Well, I don't want to comment on the tour's schedule because I'm not exactly in favor of what they're doing right now. But I really haven't had a conversation. I want to sit down with Brian and Jay and have that conversation," he said, referring to Rolapp and outgoing Commissioner Jay Monahan. He did not stop there. "I mean, I hate to see tournaments bunched too much together with too many big tournaments too close together. That's a problem, I think. And I think that's going to be a problem for the tour in the future," Nicklaus continued. He kept going, laying out the mechanics of his objection in detail. "The other tournaments also say, you know, I got 4 out of 5. It's hard for guys to play that. See, the problem is not so much from the standpoint of players, it's hard for the players to really be focused to play that much and be on top of their game," he explained. Then he drew on his own career for the comparison. "I could play a couple weeks in a row, maybe 3 weeks in a row, but I needed some time off to be able to recharge the batteries. And I think everybody needs to recharge their batteries," he said. His conclusion was blunt: so to jam it all in one period of time, and then leave the rest of the year open, I think it's tough. To understand why Nicklaus reacted this way, it helps to look at exactly what Rolapp and the tour's leadership had been building toward. Under a plan approved by the PGA Tour Board, the tour will move to a two-tiered system beginning in 2028. The top tier, called the Championship Series, will be built from the current group of roughly $20 million signature events, which today cap fields at 72 players. Under the new plan, those fields expand to an average of 120 players, with a 36-hole cut, and players will not be required to enter every event on that top tier. Below it sits the Challenger Series, made up of roughly 20 tournaments with fields of about 144 players and purses starting at $4 million. That is a steep drop from this year's non-signature events, nearly all of which carried purses of at least $9 million. In most weeks, the Championship Series and the Challenger Series will run at the same time, splitting the tour into two separate products with two separate point standings. There is currently no plan for players to move up from the Challenger Series to the Championship Series mid-season unless they win twice. Rolapp described the intent behind the top tier directly. When fans tune into the PGA Tour Championship Series, they know they will see the best players in the world competing head-to-head, he said. Tiger Woods, who chaired the Future Competition Committee that spent months developing the plan, framed the changes as being about the collective good of the sport rather than any single individual. This work was never about any one player or person, Woods said. It was Woods's first public appearance since a DUI arrest earlier in the year, which meant the unveiling of the new competitive model carried extra attention beyond the policy itself. The system also includes a promotion and relegation mechanism. Players can earn a spot in the Championship Series by finishing inside the season's top 20, or by winning twice in a single season on the Challenger Series. Lower-ranked players in the Championship Series are relegated out of it each year. Players who are relegated are not dropped straight into the Challenger Series either. They first get a chance in a domestic, last chance, series of 4 to 6 fall events, with a limited number of Championship Series spots available to the top finishers there. Miss that opportunity, and a player heads to the Challenger Series the following season. Not every top player agreed with the framing Rolapp and Woods offered. Rory McIlroy raised his concerns first at the US Open at Shinnecock Hills, questioning what he called the tour's Track 1 and Track 2 system and citing the Canadian Open as an example of an event that could be pushed down a level. Once the plan was formally announced, he sharpened that criticism, describing the lower tier in stark terms. He called it a glorified Corn Ferry event, referencing the tour's developmental circuit. He also raised a financial concern about which tournaments would survive at the top level at all. I just think there's going to be certain events that might lose their status if a sponsor doesn't pony up $30 million, McIlroy said. Rolapp pushed back on the Corn Ferry comparison directly at the press conference where the changes were unveiled. If you look at the Challenger Series events, they'll be at venues you recognize. They'll be for healthy purses, which we announced today, he said. They'll include a subset of the same 200 and change players that we have today. That is much different than what the Corn Ferry Tour is today, Rolapp added. He also said he had spoken with McIlroy directly, at a point when McIlroy was skipping his third signature event of the year, the Travelers Championship, and that the new model was designed to serve the same players with a similar overall number of tournaments. Other top players took a different view than McIlroy. Xander Schauffele said he was encouraged by the tour committing to a long-term direction rather than continuing to adjust its structure year to year. It's nice though to think that this is going to be, whatever it ends up being, will be what golf will be for at least until I'm done playing. I think these last 3 or 4 years have been a little hectic, Schauffele said. Scottie Scheffler, the world number 1, said at the time that he had thoughts on the changes but preferred not to share them in the middle of a tournament week. Ahead of that long-term 2028 overhaul, the tour's near-term scheduling changes were already being felt in 2027, and this is where Nicklaus's objection became something more concrete than a general philosophical disagreement. The tour's leadership has been working toward compressing the season into roughly 6 months, from around February through August, packing the marquee signature events tightly together in the stretch before the Masters. Nicklaus is directly connected to one of the events that sits in the path of that compression, the Cognizant Classic, held at PGA National in Florida, an event he is personally involved with. As the signature events get bunched closer together, tournaments like that one lose the space on the calendar and the spotlight that come with standing alone. That is not an abstract complaint about tradition. It is a specific, identifiable consequence for a specific tournament that Nicklaus has a direct stake in, which is part of why his comments at Muirfield Village carried more weight than a general statement of nostalgia. Reaction to Nicklaus's comments came quickly from people who cover the sport closely. Golf broadcaster Dan Rappaport, speaking on his program Dan on Golf, addressed what it would mean for Rolapp to respond to a figure like Nicklaus. It's got to be hard for Brian Rolapp, a guy who comes from outside of golf, to hear Jack Nicklaus say this stuff, and he's going to have that conversation, Rappaport said. He continued, describing what he expected that conversation to look like. I'm sure he's going to be very diplomatic, but he's going to have to explain that like the PGA Tour as you knew it is not what the PGA Tour of tomorrow is going to look like. That conversation did eventually happen. According to reporting from golf writer Bob Herrig, Nicklaus and Rolapp met in person at Muirfield Village during Memorial Week, marking the first time the two had spoken directly since Rolapp took the job. The meeting was described as cordial, though Herrig's reporting noted there were uncomfortable moments within it. Nicklaus reportedly raised his concerns about the two-tiered model directly with Rolapp in that meeting, again pointing to the impact on events like the Cognizant Classic. Herrig also framed the moment in terms of where Nicklaus is in his life and career, noting that at 86 years old, the Golden Bear has little left to lose by speaking his mind. What was not reported was any kind of dramatic public confrontation between the two men beyond the press conference remarks themselves. The meeting between Nicklaus and Rolapp took place privately, away from cameras, after Nicklaus had already made his position clear to reporters. Herrig's reporting also placed the meeting in the context of what the Memorial Tournament itself represents to Nicklaus. He founded the event in 1976, at a time when almost no tournament outside the four major championships stood out on the calendar the way his event in Ohio did. Today, the Memorial is one of 9 tournaments carrying a $20 million purse, not counting the Players' Championship and the Tour Championship, and the Tour's plan calls for even more events to reach that financial tier under the new championship series. That is the tournament landscape Nicklaus has spent roughly half a century shaping, which is part of why he is positioned to speak about the changes with a level of standing very few others in golf currently have. What makes this moment significant is less about theatrics and more about who was speaking. Nicklaus is 86 years old. He does not need anything from the current PGA Tour leadership, and he has spent decades building the credibility to speak plainly about the sport without consequence. When he says a scheduling model is going to be a problem for the Tour in the future, it lands differently than the same sentence coming from a mid-card player or a Tour employee. His remarks also echoed a wider mood in the locker room. Multiple reports noted that the concerns Nicklaus raised, particularly about player fatigue and event bunching, were shared by a large portion of the current playing field, even if few were willing to state them as directly and as publicly as Nicklaus did in his pre-tournament press conference. The dispute leaves the sport pointed toward two very different outcomes, and neither is settled yet. One path leads toward the Tour holding firm on its 2028 two-tiered model, delivering the compressed, star-driven product Rolapp has described using the words scarcity, simplicity, and parity, built for stronger media rights deals and a more predictable television package. Under that path, the season runs roughly from February through August. The Championship Series and Challenger Series overlap in nearly every week except for about 7 scheduled gaps, and the sport accepts thinner fields at its marquee events, reduced prize money at the majority of its remaining tournaments, and a permanent split between an elite circuit and everyone else. The other path leads toward the plan being softened or adjusted in response to pressure from figures like Nicklaus and players like McIlroy, preserving more of the calendar's traditional spread of events and giving players more room to move between tiers than the current top 20 finish or 2-win thresholds allow. That version would come at the cost of some of the media and revenue growth Rolapp was brought in from the NFL specifically to deliver. Which path the Tour actually takes will depend on decisions still being finalized. The Future Competition Committee, chaired by Tiger Woods, has not yet made public exactly which of the roughly 15 tournaments will be part of the Championship Series and which of the roughly 20 events will make up the Challenger Series. Other unresolved details include how a form of match play will be worked into the postseason, and whether the Tour Championship will continue to be held at East Lake in Atlanta or move to a rotation of courses, a change under consideration as part of the same overhaul. Every one of those decisions will determine whether events like the Cognizant Classic, and by extension the argument Nicklaus has been making, end up on the winning or losing side of the new structure. For now, the facts on the record are these: the PGA Tour has approved a two-tiered structure set to begin in 2028. Its own founder, Jack Nicklaus, has said publicly that he is not exactly in favor of what they're doing right now. Its new CEO, brought in from the NFL specifically to modernize the business, has built his entire pitch around a model imported from a sport with a fundamentally different structure than golf's. And the tournament that sits between those two positions, the Cognizant Classic, is one of the concrete pieces of evidence either side can point to when the next round of this argument begins.